When talking about movie remakes that surpass the original, I feel like The Mummy from 1999 is rarely brought up, even though it has become a beloved classic that many people around my age grew up on and is their definitive action-adventure film. But this may also be because when looking at the 99 Mummy film, it's so much its own entity and stands out, even though the title is literally the same of the original 1932 classic and is still distributed by Universal Pictures. We still think of this Mummy all on its own without any relation to the original, and really that's just a testament to the quality of the film and the impact that it had at the time. The Mummy franchise has a strange history all on its own. The original 1932 version was the first Universal monster movie that was not based on a pre-existing book or property, and it stars Boris Karloff as Imhotep, a man who was mummified, brought back to life, and now poses as a human as he tries to resurrect his long-dead lover through using her current reincarnation. It's a very atmospheric, slow burn kind of film that I really enjoy. After that, Universal made other Mummy films, but they had nothing to do with the first one. This is what gives you that horror image of the mummy still wrapped in its bandages, going around on a killing spree like a slasher villain. In the original Mummy movie, Boris Karloff is only in the bandages for one scene in the beginning. But many years later, when it came to wanting to remake the Mummy films for a modern age, it was apparently supposed to have started back in the 1980s, keeping it as a heavy horror film, and even George Romero from the Living Dead series was interested in taking on the project. Though, through creative differences and other factors and ideas that got faded in and out over time, well, this is what you call development hell, which the Mummy was stuck in for quite some time. The studio apparently wanted the Mummy himself to be a truly unstoppable force. They really wanted a monster that they could brand and market to the world that was kind of like the Terminator. They didn't want the slow burn romanticism of the original or the slow stalking slasher of the sequels. They wanted something big. Then comes this idea to shift the tone of the movie into more of an action-adventure film, but still with some horror elements. Something with a quest that had tomb raiding and traps, sword fighting even. Make it a Jason and the Argonauts for modern times. This comes in part from writer-director Stephen Sommers, who was passionate about wanting to make a Mummy film, and it shows through every shot of the movie. The thing that blows my mind, though, is usually with big, well-renowned films, we also know the director's name by heart as a big piece of what made it so great. But I never really hear anybody talk about Stephen Sommers as a director. And truthfully, he hasn't really directed that many films. He's written a bunch of movies, but The Mummy and The Mummy Returns were definitely his biggest films. Afterwards, he also made Van Helsing, but let's just say that didn't quite reach the same level as the Mummy movies. Maybe we'll talk about that another time. But this new direction for the film worked so incredibly well, and I think dealing with the basis of The Mummy, it worked better than any other classic Universal horror villain could have with this genre switch. Like, there are still enough horror elements here to satisfy people. There's the body count, grotesque imagery, torture elements, and resurrected corpses and tombs. All of that is very horror-based. But it's the adventure to assemble the crew, find the locations, outsmart the enemies, rival group of explorers, and then of course, the huge action set pieces that are so fun to watch. But where this movie absolutely thrives and where it succeeds the most, and I would argue the biggest reason why it succeeds, is its characters. The characters in this movie just kick ass. They are pragmatic, personable, they have wit and charm to them, but not in an overblown wink at the audience kind of way that we are so used to in movies nowadays. Any humor in the film comes from the clash of their personalities and not just some snarky joke they're saying for the sake of it or breaking the fourth wall in any kind of way. They really feel like they are in danger. They also definitely feel like movie characters, and I don't know if that's really going to make any sense. They're not so much real life and relatable, but it works better because of that. They feel fantastical. They feel a little bit over the top, but in a good way. Rewatching this film, I was almost saddened by the fact that I can't remember the last time we got a movie like this or characters like this. And yes, this movie is a remake, but almost all of these characters are original, and so is the ideas that are presented in it. The originality, the fun, the great characters, it only amplifies the scares and the action sequences that are also very well done. You actually give a shit about the characters, and they're not just here to be killed off. Notably, of course, is Brendan Fraser in the lead role as Rick O'Connell, a man that survived a shootout in the desert and found the location of Hamunaptra, a place heavily sought after that is said to hold the coveted Book of the Dead. He is recruited by Evelyn, played by Rachel Weisz, an intuitive and curious Egyptologist that is in over her head a little bit, but is also completely endearing in every step of the way. She also has her brother Jonathan, who is halfway the comic relief of the movie and halfway just kind of a klutzy older brother figure, but he's fun enough that you enjoy his antics and he's not really annoying in any kind of way. For the Mummy himself, and the only character really from the original film to appear, Arnold Vosloo plays Imhotep, and they go all out in his backstory. He gets with the pharaoh's wife, having the pharaoh killed, and when Anaxtulamun, his lover, is killed, attempting to resurrect her using the Book of the Dead, only to be caught, tortured, having his tongue cut out, buried alive with a swarm of flesh-eating bugs. Yeah, there's definitely a lot of horror elements that are still here. Many years later, in the 1920s, our characters find the Book of the Dead and wind up resurrecting Imhotep. Whoops. And once he's back, he does have a similar objective of wanting to bring his lost lover back to life, similar to the 1930s version, only in this version, he also has to regenerate himself along the way. And this is a great way to add up the suspense and the horror elements, because he starts out just as a decayed living corpse walking around, and he has to kill all of those that opened his tomb one by one in order to regain his human form. So, through a good chunk of the movie, he has different stages of his appearance as his skin slowly starts to reform over his body. He's a cold and menacing character, and I love how he only speaks in ancient Egyptian. It would have been really easy for the filmmakers to just say, make him speak English, but I'm glad that they didn't. And the studio wanted to make the Mummy incredibly powerful, so he is. He can regenerate from practically anything. He doesn't need to eat or sleep. He can form an army of loyal followers. He can evoke plagues. He can take control of the surrounding elements like the sand dunes themselves. This guy is awesome. Figuring out how to defeat a character like this is part of the fun of the film, and it's even better that Imhotep, though incredibly powerful, still has so much that he has to accomplish, and he has to be careful with how he carries it out. Now, this movie did come out in 1999, and this was still in the booming era of CGI. Yes, CGI is overused today, but when rewatching this movie, you have to remember that all of this was still pretty new technology at the time. I give this film a pass on its CGI, mostly because I don't blame them for going this route and seeing how far they could push it. The 90s were a huge experimental time for this technology. First you had Terminator 2, then Jurassic Park, and The Matrix came out the same year as The Mummy. Considering they were taking the risk of the production of this movie, changing its genre, and casting Brendan Fraser as an action hero, which he'd never played until this time, I'm actually really impressed with the budget of their CGI and what they were able to accomplish with it. It looks good for 1999. The action is also very well done. You have shootouts, and some of them are not even involving things that are supernatural. They're just general action scenes. You have a group of the Magi descendants in black clothes with sick face tattoos. That's awesome. The bug creatures are also very present, and they burrow inside characters' skin, and this always terrified me as a kid, man. Every time I saw a beetle, I thought of this scene. The sandstorm scene is also iconic as the mummy takes the form of sand chasing the characters in a plane. And during the end sequence, you have multiple zombie skeleton guys in a sword fight with Rick down inside of an ancient tomb. Like, how awesome can you get? And like I said, everything works so well because of the characters. You want to see them live as opposed to other horror films where you're just waiting for every single dumb character to die. But just the same, you could even watch this movie and root for Imhotep. I mean, sure, he's killing people, but really, he just wants his woman back. I mean, look at her. Can you fucking blame him? And then there's Benny. Benny sucks, but that's why he's great. He's just a slimy, selfish prick willing to screw anybody over for his own benefit or for some treasure, and he even starts working with the mummy for a while, becoming his right-hand man. What a douche. So yeah, fantastic characters, a monstrous antagonist, really well done action scenes and adventure, and still enough horror elements that it doesn't feel so disconnected from its roots. This is one of my personal favorite movies, especially from the time period, and just like The Thing, I think it's one of the best horror remakes of all time. 2 sequels were eventually made, and even some spin-offs with the Scorpion King character that I never really bothered to watch. And then later, much later in 2017, there was a horrendously executed attempt to bring the Universal monsters back and make a shared universe, but they put the cart before the horse with it. They cared more about making that universe instead of making a good movie. They tried to recreate the feeling of the 99 Mummy, keeping the action-adventure tone, but even with Tom Cruise in the lead, it failed hard. It's funny that the 99 remake worked because it created its own identity away from the original and succeeded, but the 2017 remake tried to copy the 99 version and failed miserably. That might tell you something about storytelling. Don't copy, just make it your own. For years, and especially with the Brendan Fraser resurgence, there's been rumors of a fourth Mummy movie being made, but I doubt it will happen at this point, though I would absolutely be open to it if it did. But until then, I'll always have this film, and I think it's something special. I do think, CGI aside, it holds up very well and might be a good palate cleanser for you if you need a good movie in your life and don't feel satisfied by the homogenous budget bombs of late. So, what do you guys think of The Mummy from 1999? Do you love it? Do you hate it? Let me know all your thoughts down below. Thanks for watching this video review, guys. I really do appreciate it. Give it a thumbs up and a comment to help out in the algorithm. I would really appreciate it if you did. And check the links in the description for channel memberships, Patreon, and the social media links where you can follow me. Other than that, guys, I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day, and I'll talk to you next time.